In today's newspaper, you have some very important issues because Supreme Court made comments on a lot of issues. Okay, so we'll be looking at those respective issues and what the Supreme Court had to comment on them. Now, the first order is about the Waqf Act. See, previously I elaborated about the Waqf Act, and I just want to bring to your notice what the court did not stay. Because I don't want to elaborate on this, we have other issues where we have to discuss elaborately. This last lines, okay, these two, Waqf by Use and Limitation Act. It observed, so basically what is Waqf? I'll quickly brief you. If a Muslim gives a specific real estate, a piece of land for religious charity, after that transfer, it is perpetually in the control of a trustee, and that specific piece of land should only be used for religious purposes or charitable purposes, and it is as per Muslim law. So recently there was an amendment, and in that amendment the government said if a specific piece of land is not used, so that part can be taken up by the government. So there was an accusation that even existing lands will be taken away from the government. So taken away by the government. So there was an opposition. Government did not make any such comment. And there was a case in the Supreme Court regarding this. So essentially, the court stayed saying that there is no such intent from the government and the law does not have any such provisions. And if you find any such case, maybe the court will take care at that point of time. This is all it had to say. So we discussed this issue previously and I don't want to elaborate this much further. You can read this. This is pretty much straightforward, and if you think you would need an explanation on this, you can get in touch with me personally or go back to the old videos and have a look. Now, the conduct of social media companies amid political unrest. Interesting topic. Yesterday, we discussed this in a different context. I will again take this topic up because I think this is very important for you. So, in this article, we are specifically emphasizing on the role of social media companies and how they should act and how they actually manifest in geopolitical tensions. Yesterday we have discussed, right, how in the present scenario in London you are witnessing active involvement of Elon Musk, and in other situations there is often a complaint that these social media platforms are passive, they don't respond at all. Either cases are actually criticized by the leftists and the rightists. How should the platforms act? Here is where you should understand the role of the state. See, for example, I will just summarize this. I won't elaborate this discussion because we have already done that yesterday. If there is a social unrest, should a social media company actively involve? No. Where should the technology company involve? If by any chance they're using this platform to mobilize forces and act in a violent way, that is when the platforms can detect the patterns and stop the spread of violence. Okay. So if something is happening in a democratic way, it need not be curbed by the platforms. Even now, this anti-immigration protest theoretically is happening in a very peaceful way. There is no element of violence. And dissent and protest are something which are inherent to the quality of democracy. So you cannot say, I will, curb this kind of protests. Nobody can say that. And nobody can actually say that platforms are mobilizing hate. All Elon Musk is doing is saying that you have free speech. Anybody can do it. As a matter of principle, he's right. But what is the intent behind it? Any state should always look at any partisan body with some suspicion. See, as a company, you are always aligned towards profit. What is your job in talking about free speech? You are not judiciary. You are not someone who is safeguarding free speech across the world. That's not what you are here for. You are here for profit. If you think free speech is something that you want to protect, are you unequivocally giving voice to all sections of the society? Are you saying that as a platform owner and as a platform provider, you are not biased at all? Is there any tangible proof? These are the questions that the state should be asking through a framework. It is not Elon Musk's job to talk about all of this. But he's anyway doing it. And he has the right to do it as a citizen. And someone who stands up for human rights, any person has the right to express themselves on a social media platform. But the expression can be so influential that it can, trigger a chain of thoughts in a bunch of people or millions of people. That is the sphere of influence. So that kind of an influence, it should not be a toxic influence. It should be an influence which is constructive in nature. I am not implying that Elon Musk's influence is toxic, or I am not attributing any judgment there. I am saying he is right in doing what he is doing. But as a platform, neutral state subject, it is the responsibility of an individual to think critically, and it is the responsibility of the state to look at every platform with suspicion, so that the intent behind that is not going to harm the peace and stability. Okay? That is one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is when social media companies do not act at all. In this specific case, you will see in Iran 2022, Instagram and WhatsApp issued generic appeals while millions of small businesses that depended on them collapsed. Is it not the right of these companies to do something to protect them? Maybe they should, come forward and be a stakeholder or give a representation to the governments that so many people can be impacted. They should also be participants in this whole process. I am not saying that they should take decisions, but it is at least a moral responsibility of these platforms to come forward and give a voice to the people who depended on them. Today we know a lot of companies or many organizations which are dependent on internet. Let's say there is an internet shutdown. Do you think as an ethical company, should you be voicing your concerns to the state on representative of the users? Let's say you are depending on an app like Instagram for your business. Suddenly there is an internet shutdown. And as a company, I have data of what kind of user I am. Am I indulging in any anti-state activities? Maybe not. But the whole blanket ban is impacting me. So, don't you think the with the present level of technological development and data, Instagram, can it reach out to the government and say, probably these people are affected, maybe you should think about them? Voicing out. And that is the concern in this article. Okay? So look at this paragraph. Let me read it out. I will read it out slowly. I actually want you to observe how to think when you read this kind of paragraphs. Most of the big social media platforms are designed as centralized services in which requests are routed through data centers under company control. What is the problem here? The data is at one place, localized at one place. It's not decentralized. And when you have such human intervention, less human intervention, a lot of it is automated. And such humongous data is stored. Everything is reduced to certain technical protocol only. Even the gravest of human concerns will have to pass through these common protocols only. They will not understand the sense of urgency there. What if there is a natural disaster and you want to get blood everywhere? You will see this blood donation drives during any events, unfortunate events. And a lot of local communities use this social media platforms for gathering that. During those times, you will observe that it is an automated algorithm. There is no human intervention. There is no human in the loop there. What is the problem here? One, firstly, the problem is reduced to a simple technological algorithm. And two, there is a time lag. Even despite algorithmic lag, there is time lag because the technological decentralization did not happen. It would be easier for companies which are located, which are decentralized, in decision making, whether they should release some data or not. Maybe there is again a need for a decision making hierarchy within the company, but as a matter of norm, you should respect the needs of local people. And that's the kind of ethical responsibility that these technology companies should take up. Isn't it? So we are essentially reimagining the role of these companies in our today's world. And why is it like that? Because, see, these kind of questions are coming in ethics. You should know that, it is no longer about what Gandhi said or what Aristotle says. It is about your thought and application of those ethical principles in day-to-day life. Is this a valid question or not? What role should we envisage for the technology companies in today's world? We need to reimagine the role, right? Because when they earn so much from our data, it's only fair that we are asking them to take up a bit more responsibility. When they can influence elections, when they can influence democracy, they can also be participants in making the life of people a tad bit better. They're actually making them better, but maybe even more. This power asymmetry that, this large influencers have on this platform should be democratized, and that is possible only through the company's intervention. What do I mean by this? Let's say if one person with 0 followers is actually speaking the truth, and another person with millions of followers is actually lying, who will have more validation? Obviously. Now, don't you think the social media company on whose platform this whole drama is happening, don't you think they have any responsibility to fix this? And this essentially is the discussion here. Okay, read this paragraph. Okay. Now, there are a lot of technical points here. It is okay even if you do not remember all those technical facts. But the whole discussion of looking at the role of social media companies in today's world and how to democratize them can either be an ethical issue and a science and tech issue. My bet is it will appear more in ethics, not in science and technology, because the level of technical detail understanding here is beyond the scope of general studies in science and tech. For that reason, I am saying I am taking this whole debate and moving that topic in the direction of ethics, applied ethics. Clear? Fine. Now, Supreme Court and anticipatory bail in caste crime. Okay, the doubt is maybe if national security, because of national security concerns, the companies, the governments will have to abide by the rules and regulations of the government, and if they don't obey, they might get banned, and it will risk. Having said that, it's a two-way street. I'm not saying that companies should take up the entire responsibility of governing. I'm only suggesting that they should take an ethical responsibility, not a legal responsibility, to maybe have some optional features to put data in front of the people that these many number of people are affected, or put that data in front of the government to say that this many number of people are affected. Instead of that being a optional feature, make it obvious for everyone. Make it a part of the notification that every candidate every user receives. By this, what will happen? Every user will get to know that this is the reality. And eventually, an opinion will be generated out of this insight by the society itself. And that generation of that insight itself is the job that technology companies can do. It's a favor that the technology companies can do. Got my point? Alright. Anticipatory bail in caste crime. So the guidelines, okay. We are digressing from the topic a bit, but anyway I will address that point. Here we are talking about rules. I am talking in the realm of ethics. There is a gap between law and ethics. You might come up with, as a state, you might come up with rules for regulating both the user content and social media content. But are we coming up, is it showing any impact? Yes, guidelines do have some ethical responsibilities, but ethics is a blanket statement. Ethics in what domain? Right. So you need to see, look at the issue objectively. Are companies taking any responsibility where there is an asymmetric impact, where the impact is not same on users and the platforms? If an individual user is voicing out an opinion, the user's opinion being heard depends on the company's algorithm, and that algorithm decides the reach. If that company thinks that this can threaten their existence in a certain country, like he mentioned, they will stop it, which is unethical. If you are so much for free speech, if you are so much for, Elon Musk's ownership of X came into news and debate because of the same reason. You are selectively arguing in the name of free speech only in certain directions, and you are curbing the dissent in others. This is the blame. All that is fine. My problem, or this is my personal opinion, a single individual, when he is proactively coming forward and dictating opinions, and the state does nothing about it, without imposing any regulations, if it becomes extreme, can he take moral responsibility? Let's say moral responsibility has no meaning in a world driven by law. He cannot be held legally responsible. What if he is all for free speech? What if this present movement turns violent? All Elon Musk had to do is just condemn this and say that, violence is not an issue and move on. But the damage is already done. The thoughts or the seeds of that anti-immigration are actually masked as free speech. It is okay if they want anti-immigration. They are free to express themselves. But that is the role of civil society, not companies. Companies should not influence elections. This is my whole point. If something bad is happening, they should come forward and stop it. If something, like a change is happening, that change should be driven by the society, not companies. Let's say for example, in anti-immigration wave, they have the right to do whatever they want. But it should not be driven by a company. That's what I meant. But if some violence is happening, the responsibility of that company to stop that violence should be appreciated, because it is something harmful. All in all, it should be in such a way that they bring stability to the system. Okay? Now, anticipatory bail, let's move forward. So, in criminal justice system, what is the purpose of bail? Why do we have bail? What is bail, first of all? See, it is like a temporary respite for a person accused in a crime from detention. There are various kinds of bails. Broadly speaking, you have the regular bail and the anticipatory bail. There are other kinds of bails also, but let's stick to these two kinds. Okay? Regular bail is a bail. After arrest, you will have to take the permission from the court and submit it, and you bring the person out. However, as long as the trial is going on, the person should not breach the set of rules that this bail document has. It's a bail order from the court, and that order is contingent on certain conditions, and the person who is released on that bail should not breach any provision in that order. Only then bail is valid. If he breaches, let's say for example, if the order says you should not leave this city, and if you are leaving that city, you are going to be arrested, that bail stands cancelled. Okay? That is one kind of a bail. Now there is another bail called anticipatory bail. If you think you will be arrested, in such case, the person approaches the court, takes an anticipatory bail. Anticipatory bail, in essence, means you doubt that state is using its power, and you feel that I don't deserve to be treated like that. I don't deserve to be curtailed. My liberty should not be curtailed, and therefore you seek an anticipatory bail. In the previous codes, there are sections which, in the criminal procedure code, there are sections which will talk about this. Like say for example, section 438. The new BNSS 486 section, you don't have to remember the sections. Okay? So those sections will be dealing with the respective provisions. This is the basics of bail, and this is very important in a criminal justice system, because it ensures that even when the person is accused, no person will be treated as guilty until proven. However, there are some cases or some classes of offences where this principle is inverted. Okay, I will treat you as guilty by default if I am booking you under this case. The burden is on you to prove that you are innocent. What are those kind of cases? Okay, now to actually answer that question, let's go to the GS1 society. Anyone with sociology optional also can understand this. In GS1, in Indian society, basic tenets of Indian society, broadly speaking, there are some social evils because of how the society is organized. What is society? It's the way we arrange our society, or the people arrange themselves, organize themselves. There is a certain element of structure, there is an element of hierarchy in that, and there are observable facts in that society. Those facts in the society or in the Indian society are called salient features of Indian society. Casteism, for example, it's a fact. Patriarchy, it's an established fact by sociologists. So, because of centuries together, because of the fact that there is a discrimination of centuries together phenomenon like casteism and patriarchal attitude, they culminate as offenses. Okay? For example, casteist slur. You abuse someone based on their caste. You rip them of their dignity because of caste. You rip a woman of her dignity because of her gender. These create social asymmetry. Okay, there is a difference in how you treat one section of the society and the other. This is discrimination, which is a violation of Article 14. And this violation is so grave that it is ingrained in the minds of people. And it is passed on from one generation to another, that it becomes almost instinctive to think like that. And it becomes a generational attitudinal issue. An entire generation will have the same attitude. How do we fix this? And it cannot be fixed just with a law. It has to be fixed. Of course, there should be an intent to fix it through a law, but that alone is not enough. It requires a social change. And this section or this type of laws, where we are trying to use the existing social attitudes, we are acknowledging them within the design of law, and we want law to be designed in such a way that they change the attitude. Okay? With that context, let me explain two cases. One, for example, dowry. And two, the dignity, or I would rather say the insults, that SCs and STs have to face, where they are ripped of their dignity. So there is a act which is famously called the Atrocities Act, and there is Dowry Prevention Act. If you are booked under these sections, the accused is taken as guilty until proven otherwise. This is the background of the entire situation. Now let's come back to the case. What happened here? So there is this case called Kiran versus Rajkumar Jeevaraj Jain. Okay. And it is in this context you need to know. So the person accused, Kiran accused that this person, the other person, has insulted and threatened them with violence, and wanted to book against them a case. So here you have to know about the Atrocities Act, section 18. In that section, the law says, if there is a prima facie evidence, this word is very important. It's a word with a lot of legal weight. Okay, prima facie evidence. You should not give that accused an anticipatory bail. I will explain what this is. The word prima facie literally means on the face of it. Let's say there is something called first information report or FIR. When you go to a police station, especially in cases like this, you go to the police station, you file an FIR. This is the first step. And in the first step, if the accused is blamed by the victim that is indulging in some casteist slur, you should by default take it. Because the FIR says so. I am booking a case against this person because I got a complaint under that section. And I have proofs that, there are some witnesses who said this is actually true. So, FIR is the first look, prima facie evidence. Okay. So, when you have a prima facie evidence, you cannot, here the court cannot, if let's say for example this person, Rajkumar Jeevaraj Jain, he approached the session court saying that I did not do it. This person is actually, from an opposition party and he's using this legal provision to vilify me. So what did the sessions court say? Okay, as long as the case is under trial, we will give an anticipatory bail. Now, High Court also said the same thing. In fact, when the case was taken down, squashed, that person approached the High Court, and in High Court also they said the same thing. Now the court, when the case reached the Supreme Court, it is in that context this guidelines came out. Supreme Court said there needs to be procedural integrity. Okay, let's imagine that the person is indeed from an opposition party. Law exists because of extraordinary circumstances. You should check if there is a prima facie evidence. If there are witnesses saying so, how can you ignore even that evidence? There must be some logic to ignoring that evidence. Are you saying that even evidences are planted? It can be possible. But what if it is not the case? What if there is genuinely some problem? You are letting them go now. If the case is false, this person can actually be let go. But what if it is true? You are leaving an innocent person. You are doing injustice to an innocent person. Therefore, Supreme Court said that anticipatory bail cannot be granted to this kind of cases. Because section 18 of the Atrocity Act clearly says so. What is the implication of this ruling finally? It gives us the jurisprudence or the logic on how the court thinks. If a law is designed in certain way, there is a very strong reason. Unless that reason is twisted or that reason is changed, you should not change the procedure behind it. What if you are giving anticipatory bail, this person is powerful enough, he can come out, he can manipulate the witnesses, and the entire case goes for a toss? Don't you think it is injustice? And there is a reason why it is not given. So, it is in this type of situations, law should be having that procedural integrity. See, what are the details of the case is not important. Understand how the court is thinking. That logic is what actually helps you in framing answers in the exam. The biggest problem of seniors is that they are focused on this case laws as value addition. But if you ask them to clearly articulate why this is a case, like what is the logic behind it, they cannot articulate the central logic in a shortest possible way. Answer writing is not about this case. It is not about listing the cases. It is about underlying logic that needs to be communicated to the examiner in the shortest possible words. And that logic should be substantiated later by this case laws, which is where most senior aspirants fail to make a difference. Okay? This needs to be fixed. So first focus on the logic, the jurisprudence in any legal issue, especially when Supreme Court guidelines deliver a certain logic. Do not miss them. Okay? Moving on. Otherwise, what is the takeaway from this class? Otherwise, you will end up, just summarizing all these points. and you will end up by-hearting them. But when will you learn the argumentation structure? What is the underlying logic? That logic, if not communicated properly, will always confuse you. You will have to rely on memory. Clear? Sorry? Correct. You can conduct a trial. See, okay, yeah, that is there. See, bail is a phenomenon that happens pre-trial. Like you mentioned, if the person is really innocent, he will be cleared after the trial. But what if he is not innocent? Even before the trial itself, the case dies. Why do you think this asymmetric power is given to vulnerable sections, whether it is women or SC or ST? These are the historically vulnerable sections where they are very weak in exerting power. However, especially in the case of women these days, we are witnessing a trend of fake dowry cases, fake cases of alimony, especially in urban centers, which opens up a new debate. Should we have a blanket gender biased laws? Dowry cases are not gender neutral. They are in favor of women. If a case is booked, by default, you are saying that the man is accused. You have seen the case recently of a suicide where on Twitter the person expressed his helplessness. That is a grave collapse of governance, I would say. There is definitely injustice. And there was no trial also in that matter. Should that be corrected? Definitely. How? We are yet to figure out. Very unfortunate. But it's for the courts to come up with some framework. And until then, understand this logic. Now, quotes not to mental health as a right. Again, this is very, very, how would I say, conceptual. Conceptual because it gives you an argumentation structure with respect to rights. This is a topic which is an interface of sociology, social structure. It is an interface between GS1 society, GS2 polity, and law as a matter of governance. So we are basically talking about a sweet spot here, this part. Let me talk about this Supreme Court judgment, especially in the context of health. See, what is the case name? Sukhdev Saha versus State of Andhra Pradesh. Please note this case. It's a landmark case. Sukhdev Saha versus State of AP. This case is extremely important going forward with respect to mental health. You can quote the guidelines that the government released in education. Now, why am I saying this is a landmark case? Let me explain. See, when you're talking about health, there are two dimensions to this. How does World Health Organization define health? Not just absence of disease, but a state of well-being. What is the idea of well-being here? Physical and mental. So, is health a fundamental right in India? No. But with this judgment, mental health became a fundamental right. I've been telling about the same point again and again, right? When you can make mental health a fundamental right, why leave out the physical health? Because every sick person physically can now approach the court and demand a reimbursement. Insurance companies will fail. State exchequers will be exhausted. In a country where lifestyle diseases, India is almost called infamously as the diabetic capital of the world among the pharma circles. For the pharma folks and the doctors, it's a huge market. And who will bear that market cost if health becomes a fundamental right? Government. Do you think the government is in that such situation? No. Okay. Anyway, coming back to the issue. With this, why do you think the the court declared that mental health should be a fundamental right? There are two aspects to this. Whenever you say, I have a mental health problem, what do you think of that person? The usual image is mentally, unsound, or in a very derogatory way, if I have to say, you will treat that person as mentally retarded. That's not the only mental illness that we have to talk about. Sometimes there are a lot of other issues where our society is just not receptive to the idea of mental health. However, that trend is slowly changing, especially among the Gen Z. It's a different issue completely. There are two spectrums to that also. Any person who is sad is diagnosing themselves as clinically depressed. Any person who is unable to study is diagnosing themselves. There are a lot of confusions about what mental health is about. Being sad is not depressed. Then is a clinical diagnosis. If you are unable to study, it is very much possible that you are lazy. Don't attribute it to your mental health. So, what I am trying to say is, the whole concept of mental health is existing in Indian society like a dichotomy. Either it is stigmatized completely or it is overused. In the middle somewhere, the real problem lies. And that real problem needs to be nurtured, discussed, deliberated and solved. And this framework is now going to at least help the next generation, especially in the context of students. Because let me take you to that case where this whole story started. This person has committed a suicide. And the father of that kid has filed a case and treated this issue not as an individual failure but as a systemic failure. In sociology, when you are reading about suicide, it is treated as a natural fact that exists in every society. And there are various sociologists trying to reduce the suicides to mere numbers. But in this takeaway, like from this fact itself, you will see a theory in victimology, which is a branch of law. Victimology is the study of how a victim's mindset shapes the law. See, there are various stakeholders: criminals, victims. Criminology and victimology, both are two different independent branches of law. And the deep study is anyway connected to the society. A victim or a criminal are not completely detached from the society. How the same society and the existing social structures impact the victim as well as the perpetrator of the crime. Both these should be considered. Right? And it is here you will see one important theory. Okay? This is not needed for you, but even for me, this is the first time I came across that theory when this article quoted. So, it was an interesting take in victimology. Johann Galton's theory of structural violence. So maybe you will come across this in sociology, I don't know. You can go and check if it comes. Otherwise, you have an information here, you can use it. You can go and do some background search. So this theory says that societal structures causing systemic harm to individuals by depriving them of basic needs are equally blameworthy as direct violence. By not creating a safe environment, the state is actually encouraging them. So you know that there are so many student suicides. In fact, on this occasion, I would also like to talk about my friend. I'm sure you must have, some of you might have seen his videos also. He's a person who is taking up this issue of student suicides against the corporate colleges in Hyderabad, in and around Hyderabad. Okay, his name is Kranti. Okay, so in the last few months, I personally can think of at least 20 to 30 suicides, student suicides, that are, brought forward by him. It's a very tragic situation. And it is in this context you need to think about it. Like, what should be the kind of pressure that a student will be facing? So much so that if they are not able to crack an exam, they feel they are worthless. Remember the 3 Idiots movie? Joy Lobo. You know that dialogue that Amir Khan says after he passes away? Okay, if you haven't watched that movie, I'll just give you a context. There is a final year student in that movie who wants to submit a project. He creates a drone. This is in 2009. The movie came in 2009. Drones are not so mainstream back then. Okay, so he built a drone and he wanted to submit that as a college project. And he was not able to do that in time because he was continuously experimenting. The dean of that college happens to say that, you have not submitted the project, so I am dismissing you, or your project will be discarded. And out of the desperation and helplessness, the student kills himself. After that incident, the protagonist of the movie, Amir Khan, goes up to the college dean and says that, you know what, everybody is thinking that he died because of suicide, but in reality, he was killed by the society, he was killed by a system that put him under so much pressure that he felt the life was not worth living. Same thing. John Galton's theory of structural violence. Make sense? Okay. So, recognizing this, state took a completely different turn and said that, see, whatever is happening is not okay. If you are seeing so many suicides, there should be a very, strong support from the state to stop this kind of menace from spreading. And the court said that suicide should no longer be treated as a individual problem, but also as a systemic issue. It's now treated like a systemic collapse, suicide of students. This is a major, shift in the approach, and it has a bearing on fundamental rights and the health of the students. This is the takeaway. In this context, there are things that you need to know. National Health Policy of 2017, Mental Health Act. Okay, and Sukhdev Saha guidelines, the latest addition to these. What are these guidelines? The Supreme Court directed the respective state governments to institutionalize some measures and ensure that this kind of scenarios don't repeat. What are those guidelines? You can have a look here. Okay. Yeah, this one. So ultimately, this case represents a convergence of law, criminology, and victimology. It recognizes that harm can be produced not just by individuals but also by institutions and systems. This is the structural shift in how society evolves. Now, why social change and studying social change is important? This Sukhdev Saha guidelines and the entire story behind it can be presented as a case study in your essay, in your ethics, and in your society. And that's the beauty of this article. Okay? These kind of articles are rare. Why? Because yesterday and the last week, Supreme Court was busy disposing many cases. And it is in that context you have had this set of laws and the guidelines. And maybe or maybe not, they will fade away from public imagination in a short period of time. 3 or 4 years later or 5 years later, another incident pops up and the article writers will start quoting Sukhdev Saha guidelines. Supreme Court said so and so. I wish such kind of situations don't happen. I wish that there is indeed some change in how the society responds. Okay? So that brings us to the end of today's discussion. Each of this discussion today is extremely important for your value addition perspective. So read the background, the logics that we have discussed, and also how you approach these issues. Okay? That's it from my end. Thank you.